So this here's our painting video for the brand new Fabius Bile model. It just released yesterday, and we've got the model assembled and painted now. This will be the painting video on how we got them to look this way. If you have one of these, or if you're interested in getting one of these and you want to see how we did them up, please stay tuned. If you find this video helpful, please feel free to leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you could, and otherwise than that, just stay tuned. You'll see us paint him up, and there'll be some photos at the end of the video that will show you some different angles, just so you can get a good look at the entire model. Otherwise than that, stay tuned, and we'll see you in a few minutes. So this here's our video on how to paint Fabius Bile, the new model. Now, we're looking at him, trying to figure out where to start, and like most models with a cloak, what we're going to want to do is start on the inside here, so we can mount them on the base, and then we don't have to damage any of the paint job while we're holding it. So we have to do the parts that are involved here first. Now the guidebook recommends that we use a Bugman's Glow for our base coat for our cloak. It's a nice dark shade, and it's good for basing skin, so I think that's what we are going to use. So we're going to use Bugman's Glow, and we're going to do all the inside of the cloak, as well as we may as well base the whole cloak itself. So Bugman's Glow is a base layer, so it should get some decent coverage here. Just like so. But it is a little bit runny because we've watered it down. So we'll probably need 2 coats at least to get the coverage we want. But we're just going to keep going at this and meet back here in another few minutes when it's done. This is the model now that we're finished with the Bugman's Glow. And we did all the underside of the robes as well as the entire back of the robe as well. And then we did the little fleshy bit tissue on the backpack. So after we're done with that, what we're going to do now is add a shade, and we're going to do some Agrax Earthshade, and that's just to fill in all of these cracks a little bit darker, and we're going to concentrate a little bit on the inside here as well. So we'll do that now. Just going to spread that Earthshade, trying to get into all of the seams. Just like so. Pushing it around a little bit. So we'll do that for the rest of the model, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So this is our model now that the shade is dry, and as you can see, it's really darkened it up a bit, but it's also filled in all of those seams. Now what we're going to do is just work on the inside, which is going to get a different color than the outside. So we're going to add a dry brush to that of something dark because it's in shade. So we're going to do some Gorthor brown, I believe, and we're going to just dry brush that right over all of this area. Just like so. So it still leaves the Agrax Earthshade in the crevices. So it still looks dark, but we're going to fill it in slowly. So we'll finish up with this and be back here in a few minutes. So this is the inside of the coat now that we finished with our brown. And you can see the slightly difference in shade between the leathery outside and the brown on the inside. And that'll serve enough to give us a shade once everything else is done. So now we're going to change gears and work on the legs, so that we can get this mounted to the base and we can work on the rest of the model. So for the legs, because it's Emperor's Children, we're going to go with a purple. And it's going to take a base of Naggaroth Knight, which we're going to coat all over the 2-leg armor, trying our best not to get it onto Gorthor brown as well. Take our Naggaroth Knight, and we're just going to start painting over the armor just like that. So we'll finish it up and we'll be back here in a moment. So here's the model now that we finished with the Naggaroth Knight. So we did both of the legs, and you can't quite see them because it's so dark. But they are done all the way up to the groin area anyway. The legs don't extend past that. It's part of the way the model is made. And we did fairly well for not getting anything on the inside of the cloak. While we were at it, we did the shoulder pad in purple, both arms, and we did the backpack as well. So those are all Emperor's Children holdbacks from when he was a substantial member of the Legion. So now we're going to move on from there. So the next thing we're going to do is shade all that purple. So we're going to make it even darker by adding some Nuln oil to it. So that'll get in all the gears and highlight all of the trim and all the places we're going to come by later with our highlights, as well as doing all the backpack and such. So we'll do that now just to get the purple out of the way, and we'll be right back. So this is our model now that the Nuln oil has dried, and all it did was darken in that purple again even more. So what we're going to do now is add a highlight and start to bring that back up. And for that we're going to use some Xereus purple, and we're just going to dry brush that right over all the Naggaroth Night. Just like so. So that's adding a nice richer purple color. So we'll do that a little bit more. Do that definitely on the legs, brighten them up, and we'll be back here in a few minutes when that's done for the next step. So here's our model now that we're finished with the Xereus purple, and we've really, brightened up the legs a little bit. So what we're going to do now is one more edge highlight, just sort of on the top of these shin armor guards, as well as on the shoes and things like that. And we're going to do all that with this pink horror, which is notably a little bit brighter than everything else. And just gently put it like that. Just like so. So we'll finish up all the edge highlight. We'll meet back here in a few minutes, and we'll go from there. So this is our model now that we finished with the pink horror. So as you can see, we've added that edge highlight of pink horror here, as well as on the shoes, on the edges of the armor there. We've got a little bit on the back elbows, as well as the top of the backpack here, and then on the other elbow, and then a little bit of just a dry brush on the shoulder pad just to add a little bit of highlight there. So with that, we're finished with our purple, and we're going to add the trim to the legs, and it's a gold trim. So we're going to use our Retributor armor, which is a nice bright gold, and we're going to just delicately fill in all of the trim with that, and that'll help frame the legs a little bit better. So we'll do that now and meet back here in a few minutes. So here's our model now that we finished with the Retributor armor. Now we also did this shoulder pad here. There's a lot more other things to do with the Retributor armor, the skulls and stuff, but we'll do all that later once we've moved on to the backpack. We've done all the metallics and things like that. So for now, we're just focusing on the legs so we can get the model glued to the base. So what we're going to do now is shade that gold with some Seraphim Sepia, and that'll create a little bit of a reddish type of a gold, which will match better with the pink, and then we'll add a highlight after that. So now that the Seraphim Sepia is dried, you can see that we've got a reddish sort of tinged gold. So what we're going to do now is just brighten that up once more, and Runelord brass is what we're going to use. So I'm going to take that Runelord brass, which is part silver and part gold, and we're just going to put that right over our gold, which is going to whiten it up a little bit. Just like so. So as you can see, we've changed the shade of it a little bit. So we'll finish up with this, clean up the edges, and then we'll probably be ready to do that last step on the legs here. So we'll do that now and be right back. So this is our gold trim now that we've lightened it up a bit. So we're going to do one more thing. We're going to take some Leadbelcher, and we're going to go over that gear there, and that cable that's in the back here. So just a little bit of the Leadbelcher, And being very careful because this is the last thing we're doing. We're just going to pick out those few details. And it adds one more piece of color. Like so. So we'll do those gears, be back here in a few minutes, and we'll probably mount them to the base then. So here's our model now. It's attached to the base and it's on the painting handle, so we can move it around a little bit easier now. And we're ready to move on to finishing that coat that we had started earlier. So what we're going to do with that is add a dry brush of Cadian Fleshtone. This is going to light it up. This is flesh colored. We're going to make sure that the paint's all watered down so it runs smoothly, but we're still going to dry brush it. And so as you can see here, we're going to slowly lighten it back up again. I'm coming from this direction because I don't want to hit the leg that we finished. And I don't mind if we go over any of the tools or anything because that stuff's not done yet. So we're going to keep going with this, very lightly dry brushing. Trying to brighten them back up here. And take a couple of coats of the Cadian Fleshtone to cover up all that shading and such. But we'll do that now, and we'll go on from there once it's done. This is the model now that we finished with the Cadian Fleshtone, and as you can see, that flayed flesh coat is much more bright now. So what we're going to do is add another highlight layer to that, which we're going to do with Kislev flesh, which is considerably lighter than the Cadian Fleshtone we've been using. So same idea, very, very watered down so it runs well. And then just a little dry brush. And we're just going to go over the high points. Just like so. So here's our model now that we've added the Kislev flesh. And as you can see now, we've got a much brighter, more paler skin, which is what we want for a dried out old pieces of skin that are stitched together. So we're going to do one more highlight layer on that. We're going to do that with some Flayed flesh because that literally describes what we're doing. And this is even brighter than the Kislev flesh, so you want even less of it. And we're just going to hit the very, very high points. Just like the edges there, see? A little bit on each panel. Just like that. And that'll give us the depth of color that we want. So we'll finish up the model, be back here in a few minutes to move on from there. So this is our model now that we finished with the flesh, and we're pretty happy with how it turned out. It's got several shades to it, so dark and light spots. It's colored by panel, so it looks pretty good. So what we're going to move on now is to another color altogether, and we're going to start working on the gloves and the injector gun body barrel here. So we're going to do those two things. They're going to go black, but instead of using actual black, we're going to use some Eshen gray, which is just a tiny bit lighter. And we're just going to start painting those in there. Just like so. So we'll start painting that in, and we'll be back here in just a few moments. So this is our model now. The Eshen gray has dried, and what we're going to do is add a highlight to that, which we're going to do with some Dawnstone. And it'll just be pretty much an edge highlight here. Put that along the gun. Put that along his hands. Put that along all the cabling. And we're just going to add a highlight to anything else we colored with the Eshen gray, just to lighten it up, and then we'll be back here in a few minutes. So now that our gray, black gloves and cabling is all finished, we're going to move on to these spider-like arms up above. We're going to do those with metallics, so we're going to take Leadbelcher for that. We're also going to do all of the pieces hanging down here, as well as these two large cables coming across the side and the 4 little vents that are on the back of the backpack. So we'll do all that with our Leadbelcher, and we'll be back in a few moments once that's all finished. So now our metallic spider claws are all finished. So we did them on both sides, as well as some of the details on the backpack. So we got that finished. Our next move is going to be to continue with the gold trim. We have to do around this shoulder pad. We have to do the skulls, these canisters. We're going to do a few of the details on the arms here, as well as all of the trim on the gloves and the gun, and this side as well, and the skull head on the walking staff. So all of that will be the same gold that we did earlier. The Retributor armor with the Seraphim Sepia and the Runelord brass as a highlight. Same thing that we did for the trim on the legs earlier. So we'll do that now, clean all that up, and be back here in a few more minutes. So here's our model now that we finished with the gold trim. And as you can see, it's starting to take shape. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the face. So we've got the main face here, as well as the head just sort of attached to the side here. So both of those are going to get a base of Rakarth flesh. I'm just going to put a little bit of that watered down. Over his face. And as it dries, you'll see the detail up here. So we'll keep going at this, and we'll be back in a few more minutes once this is dried and settled. So as the Rakarth flesh is drying, we also took a little bit of Gorthor brown and just did that shoulder cheek brace there, one on each side. So we'll let that dry as well, and then we'll be ready for our next part. So now that that is finished and the Rakarth flesh is dried, what we're going to do now is add a shade to that, and we're going to put some Reikland Fleshshade on it, which is a little bit of a Fleshtone color, and that'll make them look a little healthier here. So we'll do that now. We'll move it around a little bit with the brush to get it where we want it. So it pools where we like, and we get that face look to it. So we'll let that dry there. We'll do the face down on the attached head on the waistcoat. And then we'll back in a few more minutes when it's done. So Fabius Bile is coming along half decently. What we're going to do now is finish off his face, and we're going to use a little bit of a dry brush of Kislev flesh. So we're skipping the Cadian that we did on the actual coat, and we're jumping right to a much paler layer. So we still want this as a dry brush. Just like so. just like that. So we'll finish that off and meet back here again. So now that we finished with the Kislev flesh, we're going to add one more paler layer. We're going to use some Pallid Wych flesh, and we're just going to dry brush that over both the face and especially the decaying face down below. Make sure it's very, very watery, and make sure it's a very, very dry brush. It's just going to take a couple little streaks here. Just like that. So for the hair, what we're going to do is we're going to start with a base of Celestial Gray, and we're going to build up to the white. We're just going to start coloring in all of the hair with this grayer base, making sure to fill in all of the recesses, so keep it very watered down, just like so. So we'll keep doing that. We'll be back here in a few minutes when it's all done. With our Celestial Gray base dry, we're going to move on to a highlight of Ulthuan Gray, and that's a little bit brighter. So once again, we only want a little bit on our brush, just to give a highlight on that. As you can see, it's a little bit brighter, so we'll finish up this and meet back here again in a few minutes. So with our Ulthuan Gray finished, we're going to add one more highlight layer for just the tiniest little bit of the highest spots, and it'll be White Scar, which is brilliantly white, so we really only need a tiny bit of it. On a dry brush. We're just going to add it to some of these highest points here. So we'll keep doing that and be back here in a few minutes. So we finished with the hair, and then we just repeated the same steps on the tool belt cloths, and then as well as the Sister of Battle head that we've got here from the belt. So that finishes off the hair. So all that leaves us with is the staff, as well as all of these vials and tubes that we have here that contains whatever fluids that we're running with. So we'll start those now. So for the tubes and for all of these tubing that's here, this one that goes across the chest, as well as these vials up above, and these ones on the injector, we're going to put a base coat of Incubi Darkness down. That is a blue color. We'll just start painting it in each of these spaces. So we'll finish this and we'll be back here in a few minutes. So now we finished with the Incubi Darkness. We did the canisters as well as the tubing all the way around to the back here, as well as the other canisters on the gun. So with that done, we're going to take a little bit of Temple Guard Blue and dry brush sort of a half to a third of the way up there. Sort of like that. And just keep dry brushing it till it lightens right up. As well as dry brush over all of those tubings as well. Just to start to add the gradient for the fluid that's inside of the canisters. So we'll finish this up and be back in a moment. These are our vials now that the Templeguard blue is finished, and what we're going to do now is a dry brush of Lothern blue right over the top of that. And because it's lighter, we don't need as much. But we'll keep doing that. And meet back here in a few more minutes when that's all done. So now we finished with that. We're going to add one more dry brush layer, heavier in the bottom and tapering off, of Blue Horror, which is a very, very, very light blue. Just like so. So we'll keep working at this. I'll be back in a few minutes when it's all done. So with the edge of the blue highlight, we ended up with a really nice gradient in each of these vials. So we're going to do the same thing in this top vial, except with shades of red. So we'll start with a basic corn red, gradient to Wild Rider red, and add a touch of Cadian Fleshtone at the end. And be back here in a few minutes when that's all done. So we finished with our red gradient as well. So that stands out pretty nicely. So the model is just about finished. We have the staff that was done with the Incubi darkness as well. So we may add a highlight layer to that, but we don't really have to. And aside from that, we have to add some gold trim to this fleshy bit here that we didn't do. And then the model's pretty much finished, and then we can clear coat it, base it, and wrap up. So we'll finish all that up and meet back here in a few minutes. So this here's the finished model, and we think it came out pretty nice. We've based them and clear coated them. And yeah, so if you thought this video was nice, if you thought it was helpful, please feel free to leave a comment, like the channel, like the video, or subscribe, which is really great. Otherwise than that, we will see you at our next painting video. We'll have a few extra photos at the end of the video that you can see from a few extra angles. And otherwise than that, thank you for watching.